Hello and welcome everyone to this episode of the Courageous Leadership Academy Live. If you're new to the channel, my name is Dr. Kelly Waltman, and on this channel and during this live series, we talk about all things leadership, from taking the fear out of feedback and how to have better communication to overall strategies for success. And on today's show, our guest is going to talk with us about having the courage as business owners, entrepreneurs, to look at our finances. Yes, to look at our numbers. Unfortunately for a lot of people, that does actually take some courage. Our guest today, Rocky Lalvani, was shocked to learn that a lot of business owners don't actually look at their financial reports. I know it's crazy, but it's true. And what he's found is that it has a lot to do with our mindset around money. And we tend to have a lot of fear and shame. So when he realized just how much of a problem this is, he knew that it was his purpose to help business owners be more profitable. Because let's face it, if we're not making a profit, we can't sustain our business. We can't serve people and help them in the way that we want to do. So it does make a difference. It's important. So Rocky serves as Chief Profitability Officer for business owners. He teaches them how to ensure that they get paid and they make profit a priority, again, so they can serve their customers. And he's going to share some of that wisdom with us today. And just to share a little bit more about Rocky, he started with nothing when his parents immigrated to the United States when he was just 2 years old, and his parents were in their 40s. It was his parents' second time starting over in life as they moved here to experience the American dream. And in spite of a lot of struggles and his mom passing away when he was just 7 years old, Rocky's been able to achieve financial and life success, and he loves to share his journey and inspire others to achieve their dream even faster. And that's what he's going to do with us today. So without further ado, let's bring Rocky into the studio. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited
Yeah.
to be here, Kelly.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're really excited to have you here. So I always like to give my guests the opportunity. Is there anything more you want to share in terms of an introduction, explaining the work you do? Tell us more about you and your work.
So basically what I do is I help people with money. I was kind of shocked and amazed to learn that people had so many struggles with money. And so I started to think about it and started to research it and try and figure out what's going on. And the reality is we go to school, right, to get a job to make money. But the one thing they never teach us is how to handle money. I mean, at most, maybe you got taught how to write a check when you were in third grade, which wasn't very helpful in third grade. But they don't teach you the basics of finance, unfortunately. It's getting a little bit better now. And I went to college. I have a degree in economics and an MBA, and neither of those degrees taught me how to build wealth. On top of that, I think we all have essentially what's called a money story. So if you think back to how you learned about money, most people will say they did or didn't learn it from their parents, meaning their parents taught them well or they didn't teach them well. But you can hear the sayings, we can't afford that. Money doesn't grow on trees. You might have heard that rich people are evil. Well, if you hear that rich people are evil, and you start to become rich, you're afraid that you're evil.
Right.
And so you'll give away your money. And so there is a whole kind of psychology to money. And that's why people who win the lottery or inherit money generally tend to lose it very quickly because they haven't internalized their relationship with money. And so that's what I think the major parts of the problem are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I think that that's some great insight and something that I've explored more recently in the last handful of years as I've read more and more books about mindset and empowerment and growth and really digging into, like you said, our money story, our history, those things that either we were taught purposefully or just subconsciously, as we're growing up, and how they really do make a huge difference. And that mindset piece is key for sure. That's a great point. Are there other things that you have found that makes like looking at the numbers so scary? Like why are business owners so afraid to really do that?
Well, first of all, most business owners are not accountants.
Mm,
They don't want to be accountants. They don't, a lot of them just don't enjoy looking at numbers.
right.
And that was kind of, I assume that people went into business because they wanted to be in business, but
Mm,
that's not true. People go into business because they love what they do, not necessarily to be a business person. And so that's why you find a lot of people who are, especially in the trades, they can't stand doing their billing and sending out invoices, which of course gets them in trouble. People who are in the creative space, they think differently. They're very creative. When it comes to money and math, it's like taboo, right? And
mhm.
that's another thing. A lot of people might have been told they were bad at math, and so they do everything they want to stay away from math and looking at spreadsheets. And it took me a long time to realize, because my superpower is I look at spreadsheets and tax returns. The numbers tell me stories, and
Mm,
that allow me to ask better questions, that really allow me to dig in and understand where people are in the business and also personally with their finances. So I think that's a big part of the problem is, for a lot of people, they think it's scary, and it's not. Most of it is pretty basic math. So it comes back to what we talked about before, which is mindset.
yeah. Yeah, that is such a great point that, and I think you're right and spot on. And I think myself, I fall into that same category. I started a business because I wanted to do the work that I love to do, and to be my own boss. And I think a lot of people are in that same space. They want to really do the work they want to do. And it wasn't so much about being a business owner and a business person. So you're absolutely right. So then it becomes, okay, not only do I not really want to, but how do I find the time to do it? And oh, that's something I can get to later. And it does become a little bit scary because that can become overwhelming. So I think that's a great insight, and a lot of people can relate to that, myself included. Yeah.
And
So
that makes total sense.
yeah, yeah. So when you work with business owners, first helping them, not be so scared, like I like to take the fear out of feedback. And so you're taking the fear out of the numbers and the financials as you're doing that. Um, how do you get them to understand to flip that profit script? And like, what does that mean? What does that look like?
So the first thing is, you have to realize accountants and bookkeepers are process people, right? They have a task to do. So your bookkeeper's job is to put transactions into your accounting software and make sure that they're appropriately coded, so that when the reports are sent to your accountant, they can look at your reports and file your taxes. Your accountants might also prepare reports that you can give to your banker if you wanted to get a loan, for example. But if you think about it, if the whole goal is taxes and loans, it's not profit.
Mm,
So they're not geared towards that. Now, they've come up with a standard, and it's called GAAP accounting, generally accepted accounting principles. And no business owner wants to learn this, but we're all told an equation. And the
mm,
equation we're told is sales minus expenses equals profit. The problem is, where does that formula leave profit? It leaves profit last as a leftover.
mhm,
And that's where we get it wrong. So your accountant's job is not to make you profitable. Your accountant's job is to file your taxes. And so they're thinking at it through a whole different lens. So there's an entrepreneurial um, s- uh, formula for profit. And the entrepreneurial formula for profit is sales minus profit equals expenses. We
mm,
went in business to be profitable. Well, why don't we make our profit our number one priority? And understand, this is not about putting money over people. This is about ensuring you have the money to pay your employees, to cover taxes, to live your dream life. And so when you take the new formula, sales minus profit equals expenses, it's a mindset shift. And now our expenses are being constrained instead of our profit. And in doing that, it really helps you to change the way that you think about your business and that the way you look at your numbers.
That makes obviously a lot of sense, and I really like that in there you said, even though we're talking about profit coming first and changing that equation, that doesn't mean it comes above people. And I think that's another reason why, like you said at the very beginning, people get this mindset of, oh, well, rich people are evil. So if I'm making money or if I put profit first, that makes me a bad person. My priorities are all messed up. And I think too, a lot of people in the creative space and in the space where they want to do the work they love, they also feel sometimes a little icky about sales. And so, I think, again, getting people to shift the mindset that it's not about, putting money over people. It's about empowering you to do the work that you set out to do. The whole reason you started the business, it's empowering you to do that. I think that's a great point.
And part of being empowered is having the money to pay for what you need in your business. If you're struggling in business, it comes across when you're in front of customers and it
Mhm.
keeps you up at night. Nobody wants to stay up all night thinking about money.
Right.
So if you do it appropriately, it really takes away all the stress and anxiety. And then your business becomes easy. You get in the flow and you do what you love, and things are good.
Yeah. So what are, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about specifically the profit comes first or profit first system. I keep probably saying it the wrong way. If you want to talk a little bit more about that, and then what are those key components outside of just the equation? Are there other key components that we should know?
There are. So there's a couple of principles that are underlying the entire system. The first principle is Parkinson's law. And what Parkinson's law states is that we will use up all of an available resource that we are given. So, for example, if I came to you and said, we've got a project, and you say to me, well, what are the parameters? And I say, it's going to take 6 months, and I have a budget of $100,000. It will take you 6 months, and you will spend $100,000.
Right.
Now, if I come back to you and I say, hey, we have a project to do, I've got 3 weeks and $3,000, you'll find a way to get it done.
Right.
And that is the one underlying principle. When we start to constrain ourselves, we realize that we don't necessarily need more resources. We need to be more resourceful.
Mm.
When business owners see a bunch of money in their bank account, they spend. When they see no money in their bank account, they stop spending and they start selling. And so what we want to do is create a system that's constantly putting that pressure on you to spend less and to be better with your money. Now, people come to me and say, well, how am I going to do this? How am I supposed to save all this time and money? This makes no sense. So the second principle that underlies that is the Pareto principle, which many people know is the 80-20 rule. 20% of your efforts are producing 80% of the results, which means that 40% of your efforts are actually producing 96% of your results. So you can find a way to eliminate 60% and give up very little in exchange for that. But it comes back to the first rule, right? We need to constrain ourselves so that we think about how to do things. Instead of throwing money at problems, we figure out a different way to get to a solution. Now, I've read papers and so forth done by Jonathan Burns. He's a professor at MIT. He actually studied large corporations. And what he found in large corporations is that the majority of their profit was coming from 20 to 30% of their sales.
Mm-hmm.
30 to 40% of their sales were actually losing money, and the rest were break even, which means that there are pools of profit in your company. You have to take the time to figure out where they are. It's not easy to do, and most people aren't even looking. They just look at the top line. Hey, money came in and there's some money left. Everything must be good. But they're not taking the time to really dig in and realize, hey, if I spend more time doing X, I could work half as much and make twice the revenue? And who doesn't want to work half as much and make twice as much?
Right.
So it's thinking through that and ensuring that you're figuring out where the opportunity is in your business and where the potential is for profit. And it's not easy to do. That's because the accounting systems don't show that to you. You actually have to dig in and do an analysis to figure out what is going on in your business. And so that's kind of what I do for a lot of my business owners is I do the digging and we figure out these things so that you can enjoy life more.
Yeah. Oh, that's a lot of great information. And I can see how, yeah, both of those principles would really help inform better prioritization and focus. And it's great that you're providing that service for people, because I can see that they probably wouldn't want to do that themselves, and or wouldn't necessarily know quite how to do that digging the most effectively. So and often it also just takes some fresh eyes. We're so deep into our work, and so in it, that often I think that blinds us to something that's so glaringly obvious for somebody else who, one, has the training and expertise, and also that fresh set of eyes. I can see that would really be a beneficial thing for business owners.
And that's true. A lot of people need accountability. They also need permission.
Mm,
And those are kind of the two things I do. So let's dig a little bit more into the system.
yeah.
Right now, most business owners, the way they work, they don't look at their financial reports from their accountant. By the time they show up, it's old information. It's like trying to drive looking in the rearview mirror. Most business owners want to look forward and say, what can I do next? So they've got some bad habits. The biggest bad habit they have is they look at their bank account, and that is how they run their business. So they look at the bank account, they go, "Ooh, lots of money I can spend." What they forget is payroll's due. They didn't save for taxes, right? There was that stuff you bought last month that you forgot about, right? That the bill is due next week. And so you've got to have a better visual of what's going on in your bank balances. The profit first system actually leverages your bad habits,
Mm,
and it allows you to continue doing your bad habits, but it now makes them a strength. So one of the things we do is we apply Parkinson's law, right? So we constrain your resources. And the way that we do this is, and you may have heard of Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey popularized the envelope system, right? Where every dollar comes in and you give it a job. You put your money aside for rent or your mortgage, money aside for food, money aside for utilities, and then you spend that money on the designated purpose. Well, Profit First does the exact same thing for business owners. So what we do is set up a bunch of bank accounts. The first bank account is called our income account. All the money that you receive from customers goes into the income account. So when I go look at my income account, I know how much money I received because it's showing me right there in the account. This is how much came in. And so it's very crystal clear. The next thing we do on a systematic rhythm is we take money out of our income account. The first thing we do is put our profit aside. So if you've got a 5% profit margin or a 10% profit margin, we'll put 10% into the profit account from our income account. The next thing we do is we put aside money to pay ourselves. Most business owners pay themselves last. You took the risk, you invested the capital. Why are you last in line? Like, you should be first in line, because
right.
when you're strong, then your company becomes strong. If you're weak, your company is weak. It's like when you're sitting on the airplane and they tell you, okay, if we lose cabin pressure, put your mask on first before you help the person next to you.
Right.
It's the same concept. You've got to make yourself strong financially before you can help everyone else. So we put our money aside into the owner's pay account. The next account is your tax account, because it's not your money. It belongs to the government. Now, a lot of business owners who collect sales tax already do this for sales tax. they forget to do it for income tax.
Right.
So you set aside a percentage into your tax account. Now, some businesses are a little bit more complicated and they'll have multiple accounts for some other things, but the majority of the businesses will then just put the remaining money into their operating expense account. So now when you go look at your operating expense account, right, we're leveraging your bad habit. You truly know how much is left to spend because you covered your profits already, you covered your pay, and you covered taxes. So now you have a much clearer picture of how much you can spend. And if some businesses would like to set up a couple extra accounts to make sure that other things are covered, that's perfectly fine, but don't overcomplicate things. We want to keep this simple and easy. And then we just set up a rhythm that most businesses, usually twice a month, will sit down, they'll look at how much money came in, they'll make their allocations. It's a couple quick bank transfers, and you're done. And you go back on with life. And so by seeing less money, we've now constrained ourselves and we do better. It's like going on a diet, right? They tell you the number one trick to going on a diet is to get a smaller plate. If
Right.
you go to a buffet and you have a smaller plate, you tend to take less and eat less.
Right.
So we're just applying these common principles to your spending. We have a saying that profit is a habit, it's not an event. And what we've just done is we've essentially created the habit of taking our profit and giving each dollar in our business a job and then allocating it and saying, go do your job now. And so it also takes away all of I don't have to read a financial statement, right? I don't have to worry about all this stuff. Your accountant can take care of that for tax time. But in the meantime, you're doing well with your money and it's all flowing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I can see how, well, one, it is a simple system and I can see how it'd be very effective. But even though it's simple, I can see why it would be also so beneficial to have somebody coming in and helping set all that up. Like it would be tempting to be like, okay, yeah, I can go do that. But I could see that, really having somebody help walk you through that system is going to be so beneficial, but it's simple enough that you understand it and it's easy to keep going with. So yeah, it's great.
It is. I tell people though, doing simple is hard. Everybody wants a complicated solution to their problems. It's like if you want to lose weight, it's diet and exercise.
Yep.
And then everyone's like, no. I need something different than that. No, it works. Do the simple things that always work. The added value that I do is I go into businesses and I look at their operating expenses. And then we start to ask questions. Do I really need to spend money on this? Right? Is this necessary? Like today, we're on StreamYard. StreamYard has multiple plans.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times as business owners, we sign up for the top tier plan, but we're using the bottom tier features. So it's constantly challenging that and saying, well, can we downgrade the plan? Okay, let's try it and see what happens.
Right.
Do you call up your insurance agent and say, hey, is there anything you can do to lower my bill? Like, what are my options? And going through all of your different expenses and asking yourself, first, is this a necessary expense or is this a vanity expense? So a lot of people say, oh, I need a pickup truck. So all of a sudden that's an F-350, with, it's not, hey, wait a minute. How about a used pickup truck?
Right.
Nobody's doing business with you because of your car.
Right.
Sometimes people get fancy offices. Your customer never even comes to your office. They don't care that it's a fancy office. It's all ego and vanity spending. So number one is to get rid of all of that. Number two is the things that you need to cut spending on and find a way to do it for less and just be more resourceful with your money instead of wasting it. And the system helps you to constrain that. And then basically what I do is I go through and I challenge business owners and say, why are we spending on that? What can we do to lower the bills? Because more often than not, especially as we grow, we lose track of what's going on in the business
Right.
and we just start overspending. And people do the same thing, right? It's lifestyle inflation. No matter how much you make, it always seems there's a little bit less in your checking account
Yep.
because we think we have more than we really do.
Yeah. Yeah, it is an interesting phenomenon how, yeah, we think we have more than we really do. Well, and I think it's just interesting how we tend as humans to overestimate some things and underestimate other things, right? Like we overestimate how much we have and we think we have more than we do when it comes to, yeah, to money. We underestimate how much we're spending, how many calories we're eating a day, and how many hours a week we're working. We are not very good at estimating. We tend to be pretty bad at that.
And so I think that happens. Like business owners will be like, oh, I have $1 million business, so I can afford that. No, you can't.
Right.
And I think that's where the struggle comes. If you're a business and you have a 5% profit margin, for every additional dollar you spend, you need $20 in revenue, right? So think about that. If you're only running on a 5% margin, your revenue isn't equal to spending. And I think that disconnect is what throws a lot of people for a loop. They don't realize how much of a difference there is in the total cost of delivering that service is. And so you got to pay attention to it. We get too often distracted by shiny objects and we're busy in the business and there's
Right.
stuff going like your employees have no incentive to spend less. So you've got to change the way that they think about your business. And when you're in a big business, everyone tells you, oh, if you didn't spend your budget, you didn't do your job. That's absurd. But
Yeah.
these are the stories that we're told.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Well, and your story, your point about, we want to make things so complicated, and sometimes it really is so simple, but we refuse to see it that way. Reminds me of years ago, I was doing behavioral health services work, and I was one of the kids that I was working with. He knew that if he just kept asking his mom for whatever it was he wanted, if he just kept asking, she'd eventually give in. And he knew this. And so I said to her, I said, he's got your number. Like he knows that if he just asks enough times, you're going to cave in. I said, you have to be consistent. You have to, and she said, "Oh, that's too hard. Don't you have a technique?" I'm like, that is the technique. You have to be consistent. But she thought, it was so simple that when you say no, you have to hold to it. But she really, yeah, she wanted some magic wand or some magic technique. And yeah.
Well, so was that because he wanted her to buy him stuff?
It could be anything. It could be buying him something. It could be letting him continue to play a video game. Anything that he wanted, he just knew if he kept bugging her enough, she would give in.
So you need, just like we have the bank accounts, you need a set of rules. So
Yes.
like with my kids, what we did was we gave them allowance and said, go buy what you want.
Yeah.
You have money. Stop bugging me.
Right.
So it created the friction. It's the same thing. All right. If you want to play another hour of computer games, the rule is you have to do 2 hours of X.
Right.
So go do 2 hours of X.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
you have to. So too often in life, and this is a mindset thing, we always think about things as yes or no, black and white. And it's not always like, oh, if I don't buy that, I won't be happy. You have to put something against the yes that gives you a bigger reason to say no.
Right.
So I could go buy this, or I could buy something else, or I could build wealth so I have the freedom to be able to choose the life I lead and not have to show up at work every day. You
Right.
have to have that bigger something to compare against. And too often we don't have the comparator. And so it's either yes or I'm unhappy. And
Right.
that's not the place you want to be.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Yeah, as you talk about mindset, so one of the things I did not mention in your introduction is that you also have a podcast, and in your Richer Soul podcast, you talk about, and we've kind of pulled at some of these threads throughout this conversation, but I just want to give the opportunity for you to talk a little bit more specifically about that. But I know you talk about, purpose and clarity and mindset. We've talked about mindset a little bit. Like, what do these concepts mean to you, and how do they relate to people being more successful?
So at first, like Richard Soul's premise comes in from a money standpoint first. It
Okay.
is get your finances in order. And once you have your foundation, you now can build the life of your dreams. Well, if you want the life of your dreams, the first thing you need to do is define it. If
Mm,
you ask people, do you have a plan for your life? Do you know what you want? Do you have any clue where you're going? Most people will say no.
right.
And so the first thing we do is we create a life plan that says this is what we want out of life. And a simple way for you to do this is to write your eulogy.
Mm,
Go write what you want said about you. And if you'll do that, then you can start to say, well, am I living the life that I said I wanted to live? And then you work backwards to create those steps. And most people are not living in alignment with what they want out of life.
right.
And then the next thing is just having the mindset to say, I can achieve all of these types of things. If you've got a mindset that's closed off or is scarcity, then you're going to constantly hold yourself back from success. It's all scientific. This isn't woo-woo stuff,
Right.
right? If you go look, it's like you want to buy a new car, right? And you've decided I want to go buy a Mercedes. What happens? Everywhere you look are Mercedes.
Hmm.
Well, they were there yesterday too. You just didn't notice them. So
Right.
when you start to define the success you want, it starts to show, right? Opportunity knocks. We don't always answer the door. But when you start defining that this is the opportunity I want, when it comes knocking and you start looking for that, then you start to get that opportunity. The next thing we talk about is harmony. See,
Mhm.
balance is very difficult. When people think about balance, they think everything has to be equal. Life is never going to be equal, and trying to get everything to be equal will never happen. It's like
Right.
spinning plates. You get the first plate spinning. Okay, that's all great. Now you get the second plate spinning, and now you're struggling with the first plate. You start spinning the third plate, and they all fall down, and you wonder why your life's a mess. So we talk about harmony with your health, your wealth, your time, your relationships, and spirituality. So all of those are defined through your life plan. Where do you want to spend your time? Right? What kind of relationships do you want in life? What's your connection to this universe? What's your health? Because if you don't have your health, you will give up everything else for your health. You'll give up all your money. So it's taking the time to define that. And of course, building a wealth plan and automating it, both whether you're a business owner, I showed you how to automate it in business. You can take those same principles and automate it for your personal finances. And so you're building savings. I mean, at the end of the day, you build wealth by spending less. You can never earn your way to wealth, because no matter how much you earn, if you keep spending at a level higher than you're earning, I don't care how much you make, you will never get ahead. The
Right.
bigger your gap between how much you earn and how much you spend is what builds wealth, which builds freedom. And then you get the choices to say no in life. And having that freedom to say no is powerful. To say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to work here. I don't want these clients of mine drive me crazy. We were just talking this morning. I was on one of my mastermind calls, and we're talking about once a year he calls his clients. So once a year he goes through and says, these are the clients I no longer want to work with. When you've built financial success, you get to do that. It's the freedom of saying, I don't deal with clients that are a pain in the butt.
Right.
Not happening. And so that's kind of what we talk about there, is how all those pieces fit together. And I try to get experts in who, just like we showed you an entire new equation and a new way of thinking, we go into each of those areas and try to find what are new or different or higher level ways to think about it to do those things better. And From a health standpoint, I think people don't realize, the number one way to be healthy is in the kitchen,
Hmm.
which starts in the grocery cart.
Right.
And we don't fuel ourselves well. We put crap in our body and then we wonder why we feel like crap.
Right. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I, what I love is, and I'm sure that's not coincidence, but I'm just going to highlight, I love the overlap conceptually of what you're talking about with your podcast and what you talk about with Profit First and the approaches and, really this need to clarify your purpose, clarify what you're doing and being intentional and purposeful both in all areas. So as a person being intentional and purposeful in, like you said, what you're doing with your mind, body, your life. Are you in alignment with what your vision for yourself is? Are you living in alignment with that? But then also bringing that intentionality and purposefulness to your work, to your finances. And obviously it, even though it's, like we've said, technically simple, that doesn't mean it's easy. um, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't take energy and resources. But I think, so often we feel like, or I think we discredit, again, we're bad at estimating how much energy and resources we're giving to all the things that are weighing us down. Like by not doing these things, by not taking stock of all these different areas that we've talked about and ignoring it, we're still using up energy and resources. We just don't maybe realize it. And so by taking the time to be purposeful and come into alignment, yes, that takes energy and resources as well, but we'll feel so much better all around for doing that.
So true. I mean, if you think about it, there's so many times I'm like, oh, I dread doing something. And then I just go do it and I'm like, oh, that was easy. Why
Right.
was I dreading that? Like that's that was so simple. Now it's off my mind and it's not sitting there burning up in the back going and pulling me back. So a lot of times it's just taking the time to say, just get it done. Like
Yeah.
it's usually easier to get it done and faster than all the time we waste thinking about getting it done.
Absolutely. Yeah, I say the same thing with clients in terms of, difficult conversations. They'll dread having a difficult conversation because they can think of 25 reasons that it's going to go horribly wrong and they don't want to have the conversation. And so they spend all this time and energy worrying about the conversation and all these potential what if scenarios. But then if they just go have the conversation, even if it doesn't go well, they'll still feel better because they had
Mhm.
the conversation. And that weight is lifted. And that's so true with everything you're talking about as well. Not facing the reality of our financial picture, not facing the reality of living in our purpose doesn't isn't going to make it better by just ignoring it or pretending that it's going to be okay. Yeah.
So true. And the
Yeah.
same thing with your money. You can't
Right.
ignore it.
Can't ignore it. Yeah. So, what are some, and we've talked a little bit again, like there's some threads to this, but what are some common mistakes that you see business owners make?
So I think as a business owner, you have to realize that there are multiple roles in a company.
Mm,
And for most small businesses, there's nobody sitting in all those different seats. And so the business owner needs to take the time to sit in each seat and put that hat on and think about his business instead of just being involved in running the business. And I think we think again, like, oh, this is too difficult. No, if a business owner would just spend probably 15 or 20 minutes a day thinking about his business instead of working in his business, over time, you'll see a dramatic shift. The other problem is I think they think people are in certain seats with certain tasks, so to speak, on them, but it's not necessarily true. And we started
mm,
with this, right? Your bookkeeper is not there to make you profitable. That's not what you've tasked them with. Your accountant is busy doing taxes. They're not tasked with making you profitable. They're just reporting what your profit was. But too often, the business owner is making the mistake of thinking someone else is looking after their profit. Nobody is, right?
Right.
So you have to do that yourself or put somebody on your team tasked with handling that. And that goes for every part of the business, whether it's the marketing part, the HR part, all of these different things. If you're constantly putting out fires, it means you haven't spent the time thinking about your business. You're too busy in the midst of it, and you shouldn't be putting out fires. You should teach people how to put out their own fires. And
Right.
so, one of the simplest things to do is when somebody brings you a problem, tell them to bring you a couple of solutions of what they intend to do and how they can solve it. And then all you have to do is say, number one sounds perfect. Go do that.
Right.
And off they go.
Right.
And so it's empowering people to make decisions. If you're micromanaging it, it's bad for everybody involved. Very, very bad. So I think it's just working on your business instead of in your business. And it's funny because I was talking about my mastermind call before, the person who runs it said at one point he was running hundreds of businesses and he
Wow.
was hardly spending any time in them. The reason was he had dashboards for every business, and he would look at the dashboard on Monday and thumbs up, thumbs down. And so because he knew what the metrics were, he could tell his people, hey, our leads are down. Go get more leads.
Wow.
Right. And the people didn't want to hear that. So they'd know to look at the metrics and deliver what they were supposed to. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's the big thing. Like if you have your standard metrics for your business, and there is an entire eight steps that I work with my clients on everything from, where the customer journey starts, whether it's website impressions or, advertisements, all the way to how those convert into prospects turn into customers. And then from your customer, are you billing? Are you collecting? And then how often does your customer repeat? So your entire business just comes down to math. And if you look at those factors and you empower people to fix them, then life is good.
Yeah. That's really, really helpful information. And I could definitely see that those would be some common issues and areas. Um, do you have some, transformational stories from your work that you're able to share with us?
Sure. So with regards to taxes is always one of those things that when tax time comes, the business owner is freaking out because number one, he didn't know whether or not he was profitable. Number two, it's not unusual for the accountant to say you owe a bunch of money in taxes, which becomes panic, right?
Mhm.
Nobody wants to owe the IRS money. And usually it's last minute. So you're on, short turnaround types of timeframes. All of the people that implement profit first and use it, when tax time comes, they hate tax time. Same. But
Right.
they have confidence that they can just stroke the check. So
Right.
when the accountant calls up, I tell a story of Mike. Mike was in the recruiting business and he had a year where his business just went through the roof. Well, your tax people are all basing your taxes off the previous year. So
Right.
tax time comes, the accountant doesn't want to call him. Finally, she calls him and says, your business grew. You owe a lot of taxes. He goes, I know. I expected it. He's like, how much? And she was like, it's almost six figures. And he said, no problem. I'll drop off checks tomorrow. And she said, I've been doing this over 20 years. Nobody has ever said that to me. He was like, I had more money set aside for taxes than I needed to pay. And so the business owner, if he oversaves for taxes, gets a tax time bonus.
Right. Yeah.
So all the anxiety goes away. I think that's the biggest thing that what people tell me is they have clarity so
Mm.
they can see things. Their anxiety goes away. They're no longer fearful. and they know what's going on in their business and they know that it's taken care of. So then they can go deal with it. The other thing we do is we build up large reserves and vault accounts. And so when COVID hit, like all of a sudden they were like, oh, this is why I had a vault account. This is why you told me we had to save money and have cash,
Right.
because they can survive the downturn. COVID hit and they're all able to sleep at night because they know, hey, I've got 3 or 6 months of cash flow in the bank.
Right.
I had one guy who had 18 months of cash flow in the bank. He's
Wow.
like, I don't have to get another dollar in revenue, and I can manage this business and expenses for 18 months.
That's
So
great.
that's out of the ordinary, but it's doable.
Right.
I've got one person who started last year. So he was a new startup in 2020, and he was able to take profit distributions every quarter, because we take quarterly profit distributions, literally from his first quarter in business, because he planned for profit. Profit was a habit, it wasn't an event. So
Right.
even as a startup, he was still able to take his profit distributions.
That's great.
So the system works.
Right.
It's proven. It's used by hundreds of thousands of businesses. You don't need me. You can implement it yourself. But what I find is a lot of business owners are busy doing what they want and they don't want to deal with it. They're like, okay, I could do this, but I'd rather somebody else do it.
Right.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
So there's no secrets that I'm keeping from you today, because you can just go do this.
Right.
Or and go so they can read the book. It's not my book. It's Mike Michalowicz's book, Profit First.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they want, I actually go through the entire book on my other podcast, which is Profit Answer Man. So yeah, I think people, you need to take action. And that's the biggest thing. And so often we wait. And the longer you wait, the less success you're going to have. So I like to tell people the story of compounding. And compounding works with money. It works with tiny habits. It works with debt. Your debt can compound and snowball and crush you. So it happens in every single area. But if I were to say to you, Kelly, I'm hiring you this month, I'm going to offer you 2 pay plans. The first pay plan that I'm going to offer you is that I'm going to give you $100,000 a day for 31 days. So that's easy, 31 days times $100,000 a day. Kelly makes 3.1 million. Life is wonderful. She retires and goes off and lives her dream. Or here's the other thing I'll do. I will pay you a penny today, but tomorrow I'll double it and I'll pay you 2 cents. And the next day I'll double it and I'll pay you 4 cents. And the next day I'll double it and I'll pay you 8 cents. So which plan would you rather take?
Well, and intuitively everybody says, oh, I want the first plan. But
so if we went out to 31 days, that little teeny penny doubling, take a guess. What do you think it is? How much would you have made on day 31 with the penny plan?
I don't know, Rocky. I'm terrible with math.
The one is 3.1 million. What do you guess at the other one?
Don't do this to me, Rocky.
Any number. Throw it out.
I'm bad at math and I don't want to know.
You see, now you're the typical business owner.
Yes,
I'm bad at math. I don't want to look at my financials. I don't want to know.
See?
That's a problem. So here's why it's important. Because if you had taken the penny doubling plan, you would have had a little bit over $21 million, which essentially means you left over $18 million on the table.
Right.
But the interesting thing is the penny plan it breaks even at day 28. So when you think you're doing little things and you're getting nowhere, it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Are making progress. It's just more often than not, you don't see it. And while you feel like you're doing a lot, you're not necessarily seeing the results.
Right.
But if you keep showing up and you keep doing it, over time, the results happen. And once they happen, they soar. But most people give up. And that's the problem. You have to keep at those little teeny habits because they will compound. Money compounds, debt compounds, and your habits compound. Weight loss compounds, weight gain compounds, right?
Yep.
All of these things follow principles.
Right.
When you figure out the principles and you take tiny little steps and you keep doing it, you will have financial or life success.
Right. Yeah, I think it's the book Atomic Habits. I think he says 1%. If you're just, each day just strive to be 1% better each day. Yeah, because we do tend to think when we take on these goals, or we take, on wanting to do some type of change, that we want to see the big shift, we want to see the big change, or we feel like we need to go all in. But really is about the small incremental steps. And so if you can just strive to be 1% better after, that compounds and it accumulates, and you won't notice a difference maybe in the first 30 days, but you will notice it 60, 90, a year. And so just working on those small little steps is actually huge.
It is. It's like climbing a ladder. If you're trying to climb a ladder and you're on the first rung and you try to jump to the 10th rung, what's going to happen?
You could fall.
Right?
Yeah.
If you climb one rung at a time,
Right.
you will get to the top of the ladder.
Yep.
And I think everyone's always looking at the top of the ladder and going, it's so far away and I want to jump to the top. You can't. You have to take each step slowly and just keep showing up. That's
Right.
what grit is. That's what determination is
Yeah.
take the next step. And the next step is really easy.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that a lot. And I think of that conceptually like two different ways. As somebody who likes to be outdoors as much as possible, I do a lot of hiking. And so I think all I need is to see the next blaze. I don't need to see the whole trail. I just need to see the next blaze and then the next blaze, and I'll get to the destination. And we also do, we love to, when I say climb mountains, I mean like take the trail up the mountain. And it is daunting when you're sitting there, at the base and you're looking up at this 14,000-foot peak. You think, how the heck am I going to get there? But yeah, just one step at a time, and you get there and you're like, okay, that actually wasn't so bad, and it didn't take nearly as long as I thought. It still took work and it still took effort, but it wasn't as bad as I thought. And so I think that's spot on, and appreciate you sharing that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other like key don'ts or do's for any other kind of parting thoughts of wisdom for people to keep in mind?
I think the bottom line is just to take action and take small action.
Yeah.
Too often we put stuff off, and I find this all the time. Like I'll look at my desk and I've got these 10 notes. Oh my God, I got all this stuff to do. And then I sit down and I read all the notes and I combine them. And then I'm like, oh, I only actually have 3 things to do and they don't look that difficult. Let me just do them.
Right.
So take the time to work on the big picture, and then allocate the time to do the steps. Like I do that on my calendar. If I have something to do, I take it out of my mind and I put it on my calendar in an open slot. So it might be next week. Okay, I have to send 3 emails to so-and-so. All right, I put it on my calendar for next week. And next week comes and I go, okay, I got to send 3 emails. It takes all of 5 minutes and I'm done. I'm like, now I have all this time.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just working on your business instead of in your business. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, blocking on the calendar. I try to do that where even if it's times like, okay, focus, I need to focus on things, just to block it off, to make that time sacred. And, I encourage leaders to do the same thing when it comes to having meetings with their people. And I think that's a great suggestion, to whether we're talking about a to-do list or, look at financials, whatever, if you need to put that on your calendar as a reminder to yourself, and to make that, a sacred appointment with yourself to do that and focus on those things. I think that that's a great suggestion. Yeah.
So true.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Rocky. This was an excellent conversation full of lots of amazing information that I know everybody will find very helpful.
Thank
And
you so much for having me.
yeah, and I will go ahead and put your links and information in the video description, but I always like to give guests the chance to just say, where can people find you? What's the best way to track you down?
So literally, if you Google my name, you'll find me, because I think I own the first 7 pages of Google. But the one podcast is Profit Answer Man. And so whatever you listen to your podcasts on, and the other podcast is Richer Soul. The website is Profit Comes First for the business owner, and Richer Soul for the rest of life.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for everything. That was wonderful.
Excited to be here with you today. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Bye, everybody. We'll see you next time.